Thanks, Sonia, for inviting me to speak today, and Fidelma for the opportunity, and Claire and the team for all the organising today. It's been absolutely fantastic so far. So thank you. So my name is Kate, and I'm from. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes. Yeah. Okay. I work in Cardiff Research for Advanced Imaging and Core Laboratory, and I'm delighted today to be speaking a little bit on what I used to do, more so leading audits and inspections in the quality space. But I think it's something that we're all been part of or subject to in our careers in what we do. So the agenda is inspection versus audit. So I think if I was to ask people here today, what's the difference between an inspection and an audit, I'd be interested to see what people would say. So we will talk about that, followed by the HPRA, the EU regulations, the GCP inspections, and then the types of inspections. So there's a number of inspections we can have, and we'll go through that, the inspection process, the classification of findings. Of course, we don't want them at any stage, whether it's critical, major or minor, and then how to prepare, whether it be for an inspection or for an audit. So if we look at the ICH, and I know many people have spoken about this already this morning, but ICH are currently undergoing revision. They are revving up to 2. But if we look at the current definition of what an audit is, it's a systematic and independent examination of trial-related activities and documents to determine whether the trial is being conducted in compliance with the protocol GCP and applicable regulatory requirements. And the purpose really is to assess a trial compliance and ensure compliance internally. The difference between an audit and an inspection is that an audit can be conducted internally within any organisation. It can be done by an internal audit team, somebody who's trained in the auditing process, versus what we'll talk about on the next slide, which is an inspection, which is really your regulatory body, your FDAs, your HPRA, so on and so forth. So audits may cover the entire trial or specific parts, but it's not mandatory for every trial, and sponsors may to ensure quality compliance. The outcome is not shared publicly or with regulatory authorities. In comparison to the next, the inspection, which, you know, we do have to respond to the HPRA or the FDA, depending on what kind of non-conformities that would be. Frequency are performed according to the sponsor's schedule or when issues arise. So if you have an internal audit schedule, you need to follow that. You need to make sure that audits are being conducted in, as per the schedule. So if we compare our audit with our inspection, it's an official regulatory authority. So I think most people in the room are familiar with the EMA, FDA, the HPRA. Reviewing the trial's conduct, data, facilities and records to ensure compliance with applicable regulations and GCP standards. The purpose is regulatory oversight. Regulatory authorities conduct inspections to confirm the trial is compliant with regulations and GCP. It's to safeguard participants and ensure the validity of data submitted for approval of products. The authority is conducted by governmental or regulatory authorities, and the regulatory bodies have the authority to impose penalties or sanctions of the organisation if they find critical or significant non-conformance. The scope of an inspection can be routine. It can be after a submission. It can be for cause, so triggered by a complaint. The entire trial process, site sponsor, investigator documentation may be reviewed in this case. The outcome can lead to a 483, which is an FDA non-conformance. Can trigger further actions like trial suspension or disqualification. And the frequency can be any time, but I think usually with HPRA in Ireland, it is, I think, working on a 2-year cycle. So it typically occurs after the trial is complete or when a marketing authorization is submitted. This is just a table to kind of outline the difference. So if you see in the middle, that's like an audit. So the definition, again, to set compliance with GCP, while the GCP inspection is a more formal examination by regulatory authorities. What's the purpose? Like, I suppose you could say they're both the same, but the difference with an inspection is to ensure regulatory compliance, and ensure participation, safety, and data integrity. The frequency, so you could have the HPRA usually can give you 6 to 8 weeks notice. For a cause audit, obviously they can just arrive on site, but like a internal audit is usually planned and scheduled well in advance. The outcome generates an internal audit report with findings that's usually circulated within the unit, while a inspection is more formal. It can go to the head of the unit or the site, and it has to be given a response within a certain time frame, and we'll talk about that shortly. The actionable steps for improvements and corrective actions are developed internally. So if you have any corrective actions, NCRs, preventative actions as a result of your internal audit, they can all be addressed within your own unit with your own internal team with an agreed timeline and an agreed date. While the difference with a formal inspection is that they will decide what the response is going to be and what that looks like and what the timelines are. Confidentiality, typically kept internal to the organisation unless issues arise, so it's not something you circulate externally. And then the public record, especially if violations or non-compliance are found, is the outcome of GCP inspection. So just to talk about the HPRA and the EU clinical trials regulation. So HPRA, I think everyone is familiar with the acronym. Health Products Regulatory Authority is a competent authority in Ireland. As a competent authority, it's officially designated by the Irish government to regulate and oversee safety, efficacy and quality of health products such as medicines, medical devices and clinical trials within this country. This includes granting approvals for clinical trials, inspecting sites and ensuring compliance with national and European regulations such as GCP and the EU clinical trials regulation. Their role as a competent authority ensures that they have the legal authority and responsible to make decisions and support compliance to protect public health. The EU clinical trials regulation, which is 536/2014, governs the conduct of clinical trials within the European Union. It aims to streamline and harmonise the approval and oversight process for clinical trials across EU member states, and it's effective since January 2022, and it replaced the old Clinical Trials Directive. So the different types of inspections by the HPRA. So we have a routine inspection, one of what we saw here this year in the CRF. Scheduled inspections to assess compliance with GCP and ongoing or completed trials, and they are conducted at the site sponsored facilities or at the CRO. For-cause inspections triggered by specific concerns, complaints or issues that arise, such as reports of a serious non-compliance or participant safety concerns. These are reactive inspections and often unannounced and occur on short notice. So what I have seen here is where they just arrive at your door and they say, oh, I'm here, and everybody has to react, which is not the situation you'd like to be in when you have the HPRA at your door. Inspection as part of a marketing authorization application. They may inspect clinical trials whose data are submitted as part of the marketing authorization application, and these inspections ensure that data provided to support the medicinal product application is credible and compliant with GCP. So who gets inspected? So we have our investigators. So the HPRA inspects trial sites where clinical research is conducted to ensure that investigators are complying with the trial protocol, GCP and regulatory compliance requirements. We have the sponsors of clinical trials that are inspected to ensure their oversight and management of trials comply with GCP and regulatory standards, including their responsibility to safeguard data integrity and patient safety. The CROs have been delegated trial-related tasks by sponsors who are also subject to inspection to ensure that they are performing their duties in accordance with GCP and regulations. And their ethics committee, in certain cases, the HPRA may inspect our ethics committees to ensure that they are properly overseeing our the ethical aspects of the trial, including the informed consent and participation of protection of participants. So we talked a few minutes ago about what happens before a HPRA audit or any inspection. So we usually get a 4 to 6 weeks in advance notice, and that usually comes to the quality person or the head of quality in the unit. After that, the inspection plan, which is where we put together an audit team. That's usually maybe key stakeholders across the unit, depending on the size of the unit, who that would be and who would be involved there. But 1 to 2 weeks in advance would be lovely. There is a lot of work in getting involved and being prepared for an inspection. And I think from my experience, you can never be prepared. Because no matter how much work and how much effort you put in, they still ask a question that you're not ready for. So, but still, planning is very important. And obviously the inspection. So our recent inspection, I think, was 3 days, 2 auditors for quite a small study. But, you know, an inspection can last any length of time. I've seen inspections last from the FDA up to 10 days with 3 auditors, down to the IMB, HPRA, down to 1 day with 1 auditor. So it really just depends. It's really important, etiquette during an inspection, that the team arrive on time every day. You will get pre-requests in that morning, that night, the day before, and every evening during the audit. So it's really important to be prepared, have the team prepped in advance to understand what your role is during those few days. The closeout letter is issued. So, you know, in an audit or an inspection, you can receive, it could be a major non-conformance, a number of non-conformities, but it may not always be defined until a couple of weeks on. If you can actually present to the auditor an example of where the non-conformance happens, sometimes you can get away with reducing down the level of non-conformance from a major to a minor. The inspection responses are submitted within 3 weeks, and then the report issued within 3 weeks. So there's a bit of back and forth between the competent authority and the site. But again, you know, it depends on whether it's HPRA, FDA, or what the competent authority is. So we look at the scope of inspection of the investigator site, organisational aspects, personnel, facilities, training, delegation. Training is something an auditor will always go to nearly first, in my experience. Training files, we all know what our training files should look like, but to have your GCP training, have your CVs, have them up to date. Auditors and inspectors really don't have any tolerance for not having that completed. So it's really important that we keep on top of all that and making sure, you know, new people coming in, new people departing, that's all compliant in advance. Protocol compliance, inclusion, exclusion criteria, schedule of assessments, making sure your protocol is correct and correct version, so on and so forth. Safety reporting, any adverse events, assessment, recording and reporting. Legal and admin aspects, communications with reg authorities, ethics committees, informed consent, IMP management, and clinical sample management. And then for sponsor, you have your monitoring piece, data handling, clinical trial documentation, your clinical sample management, and your safety reporting. So outcome, classification of deficiencies and what that looks like. So after the inspection, the HPRA provide a written report detailing any findings, including non-compliances with GCP. These are categorised as critical, major and minor. Critical findings, we don't want to receive any findings, right? But more often than not, there's always some. What we don't want to receive is critical. Issues that pose an immediate risk to trial participants' safety or that invalidates the trial data. A major finding, significant non-compliances that could affect the data integrity or the participants' rights, or a minor finding, a non-critical issue that does not significantly impact data integrity or participant safety, but still requires corrective actions. And often what an auditor and inspector will do is if there's a number of minors, they will classify that as a major. So sometimes if you negotiate with the inspector and demonstrate, you know, that it isn't as major risk in the trial, that they can sometimes downgrade it down to a minor and couple a number of minor non-conformities into a major. So it just depends. So examples of deficiencies at site, essential documents. I know Aideen talked about this in depth earlier, but investigator site file, documents not filed, filed late or located outside the ISF structure. Lack of essential documents, and we're seeing at the moment how that is changing with the new revision 3 of our ICH guidelines. Lack of evidence and PI oversight, followed by protocol non-compliance, failure to adhere to eligibility criteria, failure to adhere to protocol, lab test visit schedule, informed consent obtained after the trial starts, followed by incorrect version of informed consent used. So small things, but together can, if there's multiple issues like this, can result in a major non-conformity. Safety, failure to document all adverse events, late reporting of serious adverse events to the sponsor, investigation review of adverse events incomplete, qualification and training, lack of training of study personnel or trial-related procedures, lack of GCP training, and even if you have a gap in your GCP training. So I think we have a year or 2 year GCP cycle. If you do not complete your GCP, if there's a lag of even a week or 2 in your GCP training, that will be a non-conformance. So it's really important, everybody has to do GCP, right? That you make sure you do it in advance of it expiring, and not to wait till the last minute and maybe forget and do it a couple of weeks later. If it's called for in an inspection, it will be a non-conformance. Training to amendments and not completed before implementation. And then example at sponsor is monitor has not identified a number of deficiencies at site. Insufficient monitoring plan, not risk-based and not followed. Data management, lack of review and sign-off of the ECRF by PIs or delegates, and the CRF case report form. The design is not suitable to accurately collect the data specified within the protocol. So lots of examples there of how you could potentially have a non-conformance in your inspection. So how do we prepare? As I said earlier, I don't think you can prepare enough, but you can certainly try and prepare to the best of your ability. And documentation, ensuring that your trial master file and the site master file are up to date and complete. Having key documents, forms, consent forms in your CRF. Everything should be organised and accessible. So an auditor usually will ask in advance of an audit, they will submit a request with a list of documents they require in advance, but they can also ask for things ad hoc during the audit. So it's important that you have your documentation ready and organised and correct. Validation of all electronic systems and maintaining complete audit trails and maintaining accurate training logs. So making sure if you've done any additional training, you've attended any other training within the university or even outside of that, that you add it onto your training file. Site and personnel preparedness, ensure all staff, including the PIs, are trained on GCPs. Sometimes we can forget about that. So it's just really important that the PIs have their GCP certs and that they're filed in an appropriate training file. Again, that's easy accessible during the inspection. Staff should be familiar with the protocol and prepared to explain their roles and compliance. So like an auditor can ask anyone at any time any question. So even though there might be an audit team dedicated to the audit, it doesn't mean that an auditor can't ask somebody else in the room or request somebody else to come in and speak. So always be prepared. Delegation of duties and logs clearly documented. Monitoring and quality control, regular self-audits, and that's our own internal process. So internal audits are always really good, and I know nobody likes audits, but it's better that we find any non-conformities and address them internally within our own units in advance, because isn't it better that somebody in your own group and your own team come to you and say something isn't right, rather than the HPRA sitting in front of you saying you've got a major critical non-conformance. So even though you mightn't like an auditor coming within your own group saying this, it just is really important, because that we're better to be corrected and being compliant in advance of inspectors. Ensuring the monitoring reports are complete and address identified issues, implement and document corrective actions. So making sure your CAPA process is done in a timely fashion. They should be closed within a certain amount of time, depending on what our SOP dictates us to do. So making sure all our CAPAs are closed, making sure we have a correct root cause analysis, making sure we have NCRs and they're all addressed and they're all closed. Review adverse events and serious adverse events, reporting processes for compliance, communication and training, regular training sessions on inspection readiness. So, you know, have these sessions within your own groups and your own teams. Establish a communication plan, which is really important, to establish that team in advance. Don't wait until the HPRA are coming in tomorrow. You know, once you get notified or you know that there's going to be an inspection, be prepared. And assign an inspection coordinator to manage the process, to liaise. So somebody is going to have to be the point person, right? So you're going to have to assign somebody in your group to actually speak to the auditors, or bring in somebody who will speak to the auditors. So that's really important, that everybody knows their role in advance of the audit. So you look professional, you present yourself professional on the day and during the inspection. Risk management, identifying potential risk areas such as protocol deviations, delayed reporting, or data integrity issues, and implementing mitigating strategies such as root cause analysis and ongoing training for non-compliance. So looking at preventative action and how we can prevent issues from occurrence and reoccurrence is really important. Don't let the issue happen and then have to deal with it through a CAPA and a detailed root cause analysis. You know, try and have the preventative tools in place. Support for PIs. We have an experienced quality team here. We have a well-established QMS. We have an electronic QMS called QPulse, very established here, and it's undergoing a revision at the moment, so it's going to be even better. But I think most people in the room are familiar with QPulse. We've experienced research staff who have participated in multiple internal audits, sponsor audits, and regulatory inspections. Both people have been, you know, somewhere where there's been an audit, or supporting an audit, or in the back room of an audit, so on and so forth. And you may not be directly speaking to an auditor, but supporting indirectly. Support pre, during, and post-audit inspection. So the support, as I said, is before the audit, during the audit. So, you know, we present ourselves professionally, and post the audit. So we can be inclined to, once the auditors go out the door, thank God for that, that's over. But really, it's only starting in a lot of ways, because you have all your corrective actions, non-conformities, opportunities for improvement that we need to address. And that's the way I look at it. It's not a non-conformity, it's an opportunity for improvement. And I think, you know, that's the way I would look at audits and look at auditors, that they're here to advise us and steer us in the right direction. And it's all about patient safety at the end of the day. Useful links. So these slides will be shared, I think, afterwards, Sonia. So HPRA, the European Medicines Agency website, and the EMA link is there as well.